Welcome to the channel where we understand great works, not just read them. Today, we step inside the world of one of the most powerful tragedies in the history of literature, Antigone by Sophocles. This isn't merely a story about a girl who defied a king. This is a profound exploration of the clash between law and conscience, between sovereign power and human dignity, between a state decree and higher moral principles. Sophocles composed Antigone in the 5th century BCE during the height of classical Athens. In this era, tragedy was far more than an art form. It was a vital medium through which society debated justice, authority, the gods, and the ultimate fate of humankind. The work belongs to the dramatic genre and is structurally a perfect tragedy. This means that at its very core lies a severe, unyielding conflict that relentlessly drives its characters toward suffering, ruin, and a deeply painful recognition of truth. Yet, the true genius of Antigone is that its questions did not remain trapped in the ancient world. They echo just as loudly today. Is a law inherently just simply because the state enacted it? Does an individual have the right to resist when a civil law violates their core conscience? This is precisely why Antigone is not just a school classic. It stands as an eternal drama about the limits of absolute power, the heavy price of moral courage, and what happens when human beings are forced to choose between blind obedience and true justice. To fully understand Antigone, we must trace our way back to the myth of King Oedipus. Antigone is the daughter of Oedipus, the tragic king of Thebes who unknowingly killed his father, Laius, and married his own mother, Jocasta. When that horrifying truth finally came to light, Jocasta took her own life, while Oedipus gouged out his eyes and fled Thebes into exile. Behind him, he left his children, Antigone, Ismene, Eteocles, and Polynices. But the tragedy does not end with Oedipus. It continues to haunt his lineage. In the ancient worldview, a bloodline's curse does not stop with one individual. It ruthlessly tracks the entire family across generations. Following the departure of Oedipus, his sons, Eteocles and Polynices, agreed to share the throne of Thebes alternately. However, the intoxicating poison of power proved stronger than the bond of brotherhood, and Eteocles refused to surrender the crown. Insulted and driven into exile, Polynices raised a foreign army and marched against his own homeland. In the catastrophic final battle, the two brothers slaughtered each other in single combat. Thus, the pursuit of absolute power concluded with fraternal bloodshed. This is the exact threshold where the action of Antigone begins in the immediate aftermath of war, with Thebes left exhausted, wounded, and gripped by fear. The city desperately needs order, but it is precisely in these fragile moments that tyranny is most easily excused as necessary strength. Creon, the brother of Jocasta and uncle to Antigone, ascends the throne. Driven by a desire to restore stability to Thebes, he wants to prove to the citizens that treason against the state will never be tolerated. To achieve this, he issues a ruthless royal decree. Eteocles, who died defending Thebes, will be buried with the highest military honors. But Polynices, who brought a foreign army to tear down the city's walls, is branded a traitor. His corpse is condemned to remain unburied, left outside the gates to rot as a stark warning to all. On the surface, this appears to be a standard political decision. Yet in the ancient world, a burial was not a mere social custom. It was a sacred, non-negotiable duty. It was believed that the soul of an unburied person could never cross into the underworld, condemned to wander eternally without peace. Therefore, Creon's edict is not just a punishment inflicted upon dead flesh. It is an inversion of the divine order. With this single command, Creon oversteps the boundaries separating the laws of man from the eternal jurisdiction of the gods. This triggers the central conflict of the play. On one side stands Creon, embodying the unyielding law of the state. On the other stands Antigone, representing the law of the human conscience, unbreakable family devotion, and the unwritten rules of the cosmos. Where Creon sees a traitor, Antigone sees a brother, a dead man who has an absolute right to rest, a human being whose dignity cannot be erased by a political mandate. Her act is far grander than a simple political rebellion. She does not resist out of vanity, a desire for martyrdom, or a personal hatred toward Creon. Her defiance is an inherently moral, familial, and religious act. From the very beginning, Antigone is fully aware of the consequences of her choice. She does not delude herself into thinking she can escape, nor does she expect Creon's mercy. She knows death is the price of her actions, yet she chooses to do what is fundamentally right. This is where her tragic grandeur resides. Her immense courage does not come from an absence of fear, but from the fact that there is something in this world that she values far more than life itself. When she calls upon Ismene to aid her, Antigone's path is already chosen, but Ismene is paralyzed by fear. She recognizes the injustice of the law, yet lacks the strength to defy the crown. Through these two sisters, Sophocles presents two universal human responses to tyranny: defiant resistance and quiet submission. Antigone is a fierce force, but she is far from flawless. She is unyielding, intensely proud, and at times harsh toward Ismene's weakness. Her moral clarity is transcendent, but it is this exact, uncompromising nature that draws her toward an inescapable doom. Though the drama bears the name Antigone, Creon is equally essential to the tragedy. He is not a one-dimensional villain. He begins his reign with a genuine desire to safeguard his city, only to gradually become an absolute prisoner of his own authority. Creon firmly believes that without the rule of law, a state collapses into ruin. There is a valid logic to his stance. Thebes has just survived a civil war, and a new king must prevent further chaos. But his tragic error begins when he elevates his word above all else. He begins to conflate the state with his own ego. To him, any disobedience to his personal decree is transformed into treason against Thebes itself. In this manner, sovereign authority deteriorates into pure tyranny. Creon interprets every piece of advice as a direct assault on his power. When a terrified guard reveals that someone has ceremonially sprinkled earth over Polynices' body, Creon instantly suspects political bribery. When Antigone proudly confesses, he sees no moral conviction, only a dangerous example of insubordination. When Haemon, his own son, attempts to offer a reasoned perspective, Creon dismisses it as a betrayal. When the prophet Tiresias warns him, he immediately assumes that the seer has been bought by his enemies. This exposes Creon's ultimate psychological trap. He is no longer ruling a city. He is utterly ruled by his desperate need to always be right. In ancient tragedy, this fatal state of mind is called hubris, and overweening pride, a blinded arrogance that leads a mortal to believe they can overrule the foundational boundaries established by the gods, nature, and human morality. Haemon, Creon's son and Antigone's fiancé, steps forward as the voice of reason and political moderation. He does not approach his father as an adversary, but as a loyal son trying to respectfully steer him away from an impending catastrophe. Haemon tells him that the citizens of Thebes quietly weep for Antigone. He warns him that a truly wise ruler must possess the capacity to listen, to re-examine his choices, and not view every criticism as a sign of weakness. But Creon is entirely deaf to his son's words. To him, compromise is synonymous with defeat. Rather than weighing the advice, he turns the conversation into a crude battle over personal authority. Later, the blind prophet Tiresias arrives. Though he lacks physical sight, he views the hidden mechanics of reality clearer than anyone. He warns Creon that the gods are deeply offended, the altars of Thebes are defiled, and the natural order of the cosmos has been ruptured. Tiresias is a vital figure because he embodies the motif of spiritual vision. Creon has fully functioning eyes, yet is completely blind to the truth. Tiresias is physically blind, yet perceives the ultimate essence of the situation. This stark contrast mirrors the fate of Oedipus, who similarly grasped the truth only after losing his sight. It is only under the weight of Tiresias's terrifying prophecy that Creon finally experiences fear. He resolves to reverse his decree, bury Polynices, and release Antigone from her prison. But the gears of tragedy are already in motion. One of the most potent symbols in the entire play is the tomb. Creon condemns Antigone to be sealed alive inside a cavernous stone sepulchre, a punishment carrying a profound symbolic resonance. A tomb belongs strictly to the dead, yet Creon locks a living woman within its walls. At the exact same time, he forces the dead Polynices to remain unburied among the living. Through this act, the natural order of the universe is utterly inverted. The living are cast among the dead, while the dead are left to rot without peace among the living. This illustrates that Creon's rule has completely lost its sense of measure, violating both human decency and divine boundaries. The handful of earth that Antigone scatters over her brother's flesh is equally symbolic. That small, fragile gesture becomes a monumental testament to love, reverence, and human dignity. In the grand theater of state politics, it appears to be a trivial action. Yet in the moral realm, that solitary act of devotion is far more powerful than the entire apparatus of a king's command. Symbolically, Antigone demonstrates that an individual does not need an army or a throne to possess monumental moral authority. Sometimes, the smallest deed, if driven by pure conscience, can shatter the decree of a king. In ancient drama, the chorus holds a position of immense structural importance. In Antigone, the chorus is comprised of the elder citizens of Thebes. They represent the community, public opinion, the accumulated wisdom of the old, but also the pervasive fear of the common people under an authoritarian ruler. Initially, the elders support Creon. Their stance is understandable. Thebes has just survived a brutal civil conflict, and the community craves stability above all else. But as the narrative deepens, the chorus begins to feel the suffocating weight of Creon's tyranny. The chorus reflects broadly on human power, love, fate, the gods, and the fragile boundaries of mortal ambition. Their lyrical odes elevate the drama from a localized, personal conflict into a universal meditation on existence. Particularly famous is their ode celebrating humanity as a wondrous yet dangerous entity. Man conquers the seas, builds great cities, drafts laws, shapes nature, and tames the wild. Yet, if he loses his sense of boundary and cosmic measure, his immense creative power transforms into total destruction. The chorus reveals that the tragedy does not solely reside in the clash between Antigone and Creon. It resides equally in the terrified silence of the community. Many within Thebes secretly understand and pity Antigone, yet almost no one possesses the courage to stand beside her. The primary axis of Antigone is the clash between human law and divine ordinance. However, around this central pillar, several vital thematic strands are masterfully developed. First is the theme of conscience. Antigone proves that an individual is not morally obligated to blindly obey a state power if its commands are fundamentally unjust. She forces us to consider whether our personal moral responsibility must always supersede civic compliance. The second theme is the psychology of power. Through Creon, Sophocles dissects the internal decay of authority when it refuses to tolerate critique. Power itself is not an inherent evil, but when it fuses with pride and stubbornness, it mutates into a catastrophic, tragic force. The third theme is the sanctity of family. For Antigone, the bond of blood is a holy, unbreakable tie. She cannot permit Polynices to be stripped of his burial rights, entirely looking past his political guilt in the name of love. Fourth is the societal position of women. Antigone speaks truth to power in a patriarchal world where women were strictly expected to remain silent and submissive. Creon's fury is amplified not just because his law was broken, but because it was broken by a woman. Fifth is the mechanics of fate. Antigone belongs to the doomed lineage of Oedipus, and her path is heavily shadowed by suffering. Yet she is never a passive victim of destiny. She actively chooses precisely how she will face her fate. One of the most fascinating debates in the literary analysis of Antigone centers on a singular question: who is the true tragic hero of the play? At first glance, it is undoubtedly Antigone. The masterpiece bears her name, she serves as the moral compass of the narrative, and she bears the ultimate sacrifice. Her death is the direct consequence of her unyielding stand against an unjust state. Yet on the other hand, Creon is the character who undergoes the most radical psychological transformation. He begins the play as a supreme, self-assured monarch and ends it as an utterly shattered, hollow man. He recognizes the horror of his guilt, but only after everything has been destroyed. Therefore, we can say that Antigone features a dual tragic center. Antigone functions as the tragic heroine of moral sacrifice. Creon stands as the tragic hero of delayed recognition. She dies, yet remains ethically untarnished and undefeated. He survives, but his life is completely ruined by the crushing weight of his own guilt. This structural duality is what lends the play its enduring power. Sophocles refuses to give us a simple, binary tale. He demonstrates that tragedy exists both in the pure soul who suffers unjustly and in the broken ruler who realizes too late that he was the author of his own ruin. As a classical piece of theater, Antigone possesses an incredibly tight, dynamic dramatic structure. The action ignites immediately following a war, dropping the audience directly into a severe political and moral crisis. The dramatic tension escalates systematically through a series of intense dialogues, first between Antigone and Ismene, then between Antigone and Creon, followed by Creon and Haemon, and culminating in the clash between Creon and Tiresias. Each confrontation peels back a new psychological layer of the conflict. Sophocles' language is elevated, solemn, and charged with high stakes. The characters speak as human beings wrestling with concepts far grander than their individual lives. The play relies heavily on dramatic irony. Creon genuinely believes he is consolidating the security of the state, while in reality, he is systematically dismantling his own house. He believes he is defending civic justice, yet becomes the sole perpetrator of a cosmic injustice. The tragic arc evokes a powerful mixture of pity and fear. We feel pity toward Antigone, Haemon, and Eurydice, but also toward Creon, who is ultimately crushed by his own awakening. We feel fear because we witness how a single human flaw, when paired with absolute state power, can trigger a landslide of devastation. Through these raw, conflicting emotions, the play achieves catharsis, the profound spiritual and emotional purification of the audience, which stands as the ultimate purpose of ancient tragedy. Ultimately, Antigone remains a timeless masterpiece about choice. Antigone chooses to follow her conscience, fully aware that it will cost her life. Ismene chooses fear, despite knowing her sister is morally right. Haemon chooses reason and love, yet fails to bend his father's iron pride. Tiresias delivers the absolute truth, but his words are heeded too late. Creon chooses power, pride, and obstinacy, only to end up standing entirely alone among the ruins of his universe. This is precisely why Antigone remains so staggeringly powerful. It does not close with a simple death. It closes with an active question. Must a human being remain obedient to authority at any cost? Is the law of the state always synonymous with justice? Is one's conscience worth more than survival itself? Antigone vanishes physically from the earth, yet her moral voice remains entirely undefeated. Creon remains alive, but his political victory has dissolved into the most absolute defeat imaginable. And perhaps this is Sophocles' greatest lesson to the ages, that humanity must never measure justice solely by the brute force of a law, but by the empathy and humanity that stands behind it. Therefore, Antigone is not merely a tragedy about an ancient girl and a long-dead king. It is a tragedy for any era in human history where a governing power forgets that above its decrees stands the human soul. And it stands for every individual who finds themselves at the ultimate crossroads. When the law of the land and the law of the conscience stand opposed, which side will we choose? If this analysis helped you better understand Antigone, stay tuned with the channel. Because great works are not just meant to be read, they are meant to be understood. Close the book, but keep your mind open. Understanding is just the beginning. See you in the next great work.